#1 on my fantasy playlist, October 26, 1996. Alanis Morissette, a woman of such depth, of such I can't pronounce the word, introspection. At #1, Alanis Morissette with Head Over Feet from Jagged Little Pill, my fantasy playlist back in 1996. This was her fifth, I believe this was her fifth single here in America. She was popular in Canada before she got big here in the States. Now, you're not going to believe this about Alanis Morissette. She was born in 1974. She was about 16, 17 years old when she released her first album in Canada. It was called Alanis. It was a dance pop album. You're talking about a 180-degree difference between this album and Jagged Little Pill. I mean, we're talking about some massive evolution of Alanis Morissette in the space of about 3 or 4 years. But it was a dance pop album. It was very successful. She had 3 top 40 hits off the album. The album went platinum in Canada, nominated for 3 Junos. She was compared to Debbie Gibson and Tiffany. Some were even saying that she was the next Debbie Gibson, the Debbie Gibson of Canada, Alanis Morissette. Now fancy that. She opened for Vanilla Ice at a concert. We're talking about 1991. Her second album came out in 1992. It's called Now Is the Time. More ballad driven, more of a little bit more of what we'd see later on with Alanis Morissette. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit more depth, a little bit more introspection. But the album also did pretty well for her in Canada as well. And then she moved here to the States. She moved to Los Angeles in the early 90s. She met a guy named Glenn Ballard, a producer named Glenn Ballard, and boy, they hit it off. He was absolutely wild by her. 19 years old. A beautiful 19-year-old woman of enormous talent. And she was willing to experiment musically. When they met, boom, the chemistry clicked right there. This was in 1993, maybe 1994. And 30 minutes later, they were at Glenn Ballard's home recording studio experimenting with different music, with different sounds. And eventually all this would lead to Jagged Little Pill. And then You Ought to Know, in the summer of 1995, I'll never forget it. I watched the video on MTV and I was absolutely blown away. This woman could rock. Although it turns out, little research on You Ought to Know, Dave Navarro of Red Hot Chili Peppers and Jane's Addiction play guitar on the record, and I believe, don't quote me on this, but I could have swore I read that Flea of Red Hot Chili Peppers played bass on You Ought to Know. You Ought to Know, it had that grunge effect of the 90s, but to me it harkened back to the classic rock of the late 60s. I almost felt like I was being transported back to 1969 when I saw this video. And Alanis Morissette, it was an angry video. It was a raw video. I mean, it's a raw record. She was just laying it down. Went to #6 though on Billboard's Hot 100. And then, let's see, the second single off the album, I wrote down some of the singles off the album and trying to go off my memory banks and actually Hand in My Pocket. I remember that. I believe that was one in black and white where she was riding a horse down the street, which was a little bit more subdued a little bit more subdued than You Ought to Know. And that was a fantastic video. Love that song, late summer, fall of 95, and then Ironic. Boy, vivid memories of watching Ironic on MTV in January, February of 1996. When I think of that video, I think about winter because it was so cold outside when the video was playing on MTV. And I guess You Learn was another one she did. I believe that was in 96. That was also off of Jagged Little Pill. And then we had the Warm, the Intimate, Head Over Feet. Fall of 1996 on my fantasy playlist. Looking over my notes here, see if there's anything else that I've missed on this record. Her second album was supposed former Infatuation Junkie. She had the song Thank You in 1998, and then there was So Pure and Unsent. God, Unsent was awesome. I mean, Alanis Morissette, just one awesome singer. Unsent was just a beautiful record, a song about all of her former boyfriends, and it's just a powerful, boy, what a way to end the 90s like that. It was just a lovely video. God, of course, this record at number one, Head Over Heels, well, Head Over Feet on my fantasy playlist, also a very powerful record by Alanis Morissette. I believe that's all I got to say about this song. Looking over my notes, my chicken scratch, and I guess I'm done. Covered all the basics, all that I needed to cover on this record. Well, that pretty much covers the countdown on my fantasy playlist of October 26, 1996. Started at number 40 with No Doubt, Don't Speak, and we're at Alanis Morissette at number one. And looking into the future now, as future fantasy playlists, I'm going to count down. The next fantasy playlist I will count down will be for my second Millennium channel, and I will start that probably this weekend, maybe early next week, and that will be the first week of January 2009. And then after that, it'll be back to my 80s and 90s channel, and I'll be counting down the fantasy playlist of February 6, 1999 for my 80s and 90s channel. And then after that, I'll start to migrate a little bit back into the 80s, and probably will count down the fantasy playlist from 1983 and 1989 since I haven't covered those years yet. So that's a look at the future. On this one from 2009, it's a 50-song playlist. I might count down all 50 songs, or I might just count down the top 40 off of this fantasy playlist. But I got to tell you, we got some variety on this. To give you a sneak preview, we got The Killers. Remember The Killers? Beyonce, got 2 songs by Beyonce on this fantasy playlist. Brad Paisley and some of the British acts like Girls Aloud, Lady Hawk, got the Veronicas from Australia, and Fall Out Boy Kanye West. Oh yes, well you get it. We got a whole load of variety. The Sugar Babes from England on this fancy playlist too. Might just go ahead and count down the entire 50-song playlist. Well, that wraps it up for the week of October 26, 1996 for my 80s and 90s channel, and Mr. Deejay signing off. And once again, thanks for watching these videos. I really do appreciate it. Whether you watch them tomorrow or sometime in the distant future, if it's 100 years in the future and you're watching this video for the first time, well, thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Deejay signing off, and I'll see you on the next countdown. Take care.